Hey there, welcome to a special Life Schools Reviews where I get to play one of my favourite games of all time. This is Burnout 1, released by Acclaim on the PS2, and this is the PS2 version which we are looking at the moment. At this point, I'd just like to give a special shout out to Pedro of It's a Pixel Thing, who's never got into the Burnout games. Maybe this will introduce you to one of the best games in the series, and for my money, it's the best one except for number 3. To begin, we can choose a championship or even a single race, and these single races are unlocked as you move through the championship, and so are the cars as well. These are some of the tracks that you can experience in Burnout 1, of which we will be moving through them all, or virtually all of them, in this play guide. And you can see I've managed to unlock quite a few of those tracks. We can also enjoy two-player split-screen action at the same time, and I've never actually got to experience that mode. And time attack mode is basically going around in a single circuit against the clock. And in the specials, we can also unlock special face-off modes, where we can unlock different cars, and you can see I've managed to get 3 face-offs, where we can unlock 3 different vehicles, all of which are balanced with some kind of a limitation. And I think the stock cars which are available in this game are pretty good, and I always tend to go for the same vehicle, which isn't the Super Mini, as we shall see a little bit later on. And so let's just select a single race for this, and you can see the Super Mini car can be changed through a number of colours. It's the easiest car in the entire field. Moving on through the Sports Coupe, which is a little bit faster and a little bit harder, and then again the Saloon, and then the Muscle car, which is one of the hardest, and of course the Pickup as well. My normal weapon choice is the Sports Coupe because it's the most balanced of them all, and so for this let's just select the very first track, that's the Interstate, and that's the track that most people will be the most familiar with, and it's the one which introduces us on the championship season. The championship begins with the Journeyman Grand Prix, and you cannot unlock the others until you've got through the 3 tracks featured in the Journeyman Grand Prix, and those are pretty difficult and they are not for novices. So let's just move on to the first track. It's Interstate, and we get to see a map on the loading screen, but you do not get to see a map in the game itself. With Burnout, like most racing games, is to make it through to the checkered line before the other guys, and you can see that we're racing against 3 other competitors, and the aim of the championship is to get ahead of those, and this time we only have to make 3rd in order to qualify for the next track. And these are tracks and they are circuits, and they do move around in a circle, and we'll have to do a number of laps. In this case we'll have to get through 3 whole laps before we make it through to the line. If we crash, then we'll get to see that crash from a number of different angles, and then all of the racers will be reset, so even the position 1 car will be slowed down to a stop and they have to start again, and that means that we have a fighting chance against all those other racers, because if they are behind us then they don't automatically pass, but if they are close then one crash means you will be overtaken, and that means it's really difficult to progress. You can see it's lap 1 and we're in position 2, and the leader has disappeared over the horizon. You can see that red mark in the far distance is our target, and we'll have to drive pedal to the absolute metal without lifting through the entire race. marker will appear on the screen to show us which way to turn, and we will also indicate, so if we watch our indicators we can simply veer off onto the correct turn, and there aren't dead ends in this track. If you go the wrong way you'll simply run into barriers, and then unfortunately you'll lose some time and you will either crash or you will skid off those barriers and have to make up the deficit. This is the end of the first lap, and you can see we're still in second position, and then it returns us back to the freeway or maybe the highway, and you can get some speed going on this section, which is pretty exciting. But you can see we're still in second position, so what I'm going to do is to fast forward this footage on a little bit to the second lap, and then you can see that we are now in third position and we'll have to overtake those guys the hard way. Also racing against that clock, and when we start to run out of time then the music will change, and then this will remind us that we have to get a move on, and if we make it in time then the music will change back to its original, and if we are running out of time then unfortunately we'll get the march on music all the way through to the end of that race. Bottom left corner you can see our burnout meter, and when we gain enough boost then we can burn out, and all we need to do is to narrowly miss some traffic and we'll gain just a little boost, and if we narrowly miss something, whether it's a vehicle or an opponent, and then you can see we'll gain some kind of a boost and we're almost at the top of that meter. Managed to overtake the second place driver on the motorway, so all we need to do now is to get through to the leader, and if we press R1 then we'll manage to get the boost, and it's very difficult to activate that unless you have a clean section on the road. Boost meter fills all the way up, we get a burnout, and we can activate the burnout by pressing the R1 in various stages, and we don't have to hold down the fire all the way through to get a full burnout. We can use up just sections of that, and well, you can see that we used up 2 portions of our burnout to get us into this position, and in this vehicle it will reach 140 miles per hour with that boost, and the speed in this game is pretty representative of the speed in real life. Find too many difficult corners on the very first course, and it's flat out all the way. You can see I'm moving on the opposite lane just to get around all that traffic, and that means that we reach the finish in first place. After each race you will gain a few statistics, and it will also show a complete replay of the whole thing, so you can check that out from the start. And you can see me battling against those computer controlled players, and it's very fun to check out where we made it and where we went wrong. I think the graphics in this game are superb, and I'm actually playing this on the emulator at the moment with ×2 graphics, which means that they play just a little bit smoother than they did on the original PS2, and it means that we still get all the same effects and all the same smoothness hopefully, and there are some limitations with the emulator setup which I'm using at the moment. As the first track of the game, this Interstate section is very fast and it's very fun, and it shouldn't hopefully take the player too long to get used to this, and it's the art of weaving in amongst traffic of course, and it's the confidence which it takes to hold down that fire button, and this is absolutely a road rally for my money. This is road rallying, and you'll get to see some off-road rallying in a few tracks later on, and for this section it's just a matter of getting used to those controls and just driving very, very fast. Moving on from these brilliant cutscenes, let's check out the second circuit. And the second circuit is much harder than the first one, and it requires us to take much more care of ourselves. So for this I'm actually going to use the easy car, and this is Harbour Town, which is the second race in the championship. The second track opens with some very difficult first corners, and sometimes in this game it's best to ride the banks and treat this game like a roller coaster, but of course if you barrel too much speed into these corners you will go off, and that gives us a time deficit. That means we'll have to catch up all over again, and this sometimes leads to much frustration, but of course you have to practice and you have to memorize these courses all the way through, and then you can overtake all these opponents safely and without crashing. Middle section is quite fast, and this opens with a bridge where you can just tear straight through it, and of course near misses on the opposite lane will give us lots of boost, as you can see, which piles up on the bottom of that screen. And all the vehicles in this game will travel at relatively the same speeds, and you can see we can even take shortcuts and cut-throughs to avoid some things, having memorised these tracks. There are two modes of views in this game. There is either the in-car view, and there is also the rear car view, and of course we can see different views when we crash. But for me, I prefer rear car view because that gives us a heads up on all these junctions, and it's very difficult to look ahead to all these junctions if you are in the in-car view unless you've memorised the whole thing. And of course trying to race against those other competitors, they are really hard, and if those guys get in front of us it can be really easy to crash into those, in fact much easier than crashing into the other road users, because you can usually look ahead and time those gaps for the road users, but those climbers weaving across the road can write us off in a second. Luckily they can write themselves off as well. Sometimes it helps just to take the finger off the fire button just a little bit, and that helps us lean around the hardest corners, but for the most part, of course, this is tarmac, so we can lean the corner around those corners no problem if we're travelling at the right speed. And sometimes we can rebound off other vehicles and this will help slow us down, and sometimes we can just jab on that brake pedal just before each corner, and this makes the flip of the rear flip out, and that means that we can steer around those with a skid. Apart from crashing into things, we'll also have to watch out for the time limit, and if you do crash into more than 6 things on this particular course, you might as well forget it. But in the championship, all we have to do is to reach 2nd place in order to qualify for the next one, and you can see we've just been robbed of 2nd place even though we've finished that particular track. Maintaining a good top speed is the aim of this game, and if you can handle the small and easy car, then that's great. It means you can keep that maintained, and some of the fastest cars in this game are too fast for the beginner, and that means you will crash and you will lose the speed, and so it's all about avoiding crashes even if you have to take the slower vehicle. This is the muscle car, this is one of the faster vehicles, and so we'll take on the next one. This is River City, and this is slightly easier than the previous one. Muscle car doesn't dance all over the road like the easy car, and it's not steady and saloon-like either. It's a very fast car, and unfortunately you have to keep that pointed straight, and if you scrape the sides that will really slow the car down. It doesn't really matter with the easy cars, but with this hard vehicle, if you scrape the sides it will slow us down almost to a stop. So it's important to maintain the average speed and watch out for the junctions, of course, because you could be written off at any second, and sometimes it's best to brake for those in case you suddenly collide with something and that writes off your chances. Sometimes the other cars can crash as well, and sometimes you'll be promoted in position, but for the most part it's best to drive hell for leather and try to catch up to that first position. You can see a few tight corners there which can be hammered, and you can even hammer the back of cars if you are driving slow enough and even hit the brakes. So every collision doesn't automatically end up with a write-off, and you can slow down and you can judge junctions just like this, and you can get through traffic just like this. Unfortunately, if the rear spins out on that bridge, then you'll be going too fast and you will skid into the opposite lane, which isn't really appropriate. So it's car control in this game, and as an on-road, off-road rally game, this really is fast, and it's something that you have to have respect for, and sometimes flying by the seat of your pants is really thrilling. Next is the Big Run Grand Prix, which opens with Hillside Paths, which is another very easy course, and the first 3 courses really do sharpen the player to how to control this game, and they are a very steep learning curve, but by the time you've battled through those, you get to this one and it's very easy, and this is a real joy to drive. Turning around for another lap, you can see we're in first place, and this is the second lap, and let's just take a flying round of this track. And the first thing to notice is to use the banks and to use the thing as a roller coaster, and that avoids much of the vehicles, and that means you can floor it all the way down to the off-road section, which is rough terrain, and you can keep the foot down all the way through it. It's very fun through the off-road, and it's more or less a straight line, and then of course dogleg to the right here, avoiding the traffic by moving through into those gaps and avoiding the big rigs. sometimes moving to the inside of those and then hooking right here to cut out most of the road, and that's a nice cut through down to the tunnel. Sometimes the hardest part of Burnout is to know when to use the Burnout. You can see that we have a full meter now, and we're having to slow down, so let's use the Burnout to increase our speed. Game, unless you have a really healthy lead of the opponents, sometimes you'll be overtaken as soon as you crash. This bungee mechanic helps us catch up from the back, but it also helps them catch up from the back. Luckily we still have one more lap to overtake that car. And on this course we get to see big rigs crossing the road, reminding us of Lotus 2, and it's great to see those tip-offs, but unfortunately I don't think you can drive underneath those like Lotus 2. If the first Grand Prix is difficult, then this one is also difficult. This is the reverse of Harbour Town, and this is the Twilight version, and the reverse is very difficult, and it will take many plays to get through this course, not because of the opponents, but mainly because the time limit on this one is very tight, and you can't afford more than 3 crashes throughout the whole thing. Luckily the first section is fairly easy, and if you can get into the first place like this, then it's not too bad, and staying there is pretty difficult because, as I say, those cars will overtake if we crash, and if you crash on the very last lap, then that means they will overtake you, so it's best to crash early on if you're going to make any crashes. See, the physics in this game is slightly different from real world physics, and taking that jump is a little bit big. You can see, let's take that jump again in the tunnel. That can be huge, and that's really good fun, particularly when you're in first place. And let's just check out a continued lap of this very hard course. And 90 degrees here, and then you'll have to time the traffic because the traffic moves in stages. Of course, you can time in seconds when the vehicles will arrive, and counting cars 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So usually every 7 seconds you'll find a vehicle. That means you can weave in amongst those, which is great. That brick wall on that corner has been the death of me so often that I've gotten used to putting on the brakes. And here, if we go left, we can do a massive Superman dive across a brick wall. But let's just continue, because this next left turn will lead us back to the start. And as you can see, getting back to the start is great because it means that it's the final lap and we are still in first place. Twilight Harbor is really difficult, and it took me maybe 10 or maybe 20 tries to get through this, and in the championship all you have to do is to get second to get through onto the next section, which is a very easy course. And I love the difficulty curve, how it starts the game off very easy and then difficult and then very difficult and then returns to the easy tracks again. And we can even use our boost to get us out of those slow situations and use that to increase our time. If we overtake a vehicle, then we know the safest place is behind that vehicle momentarily, and it's these kinds of mechanics which help this game become really playable and not so random that it becomes frustrating. And there are more cars available on the PS2 version than on the older versions, so that means this is harder, and it means it's more rewarding as well. On to the final stretch and cutting out this junction, it means that we only have a few hard corners to go, and it's that brick wall at the end of this section which I'm most bothered about. And sometimes you have to cut in on the inside because you can see a breakdown lane which is usually free from traffic and it's usually safe. Burnout is absolutely not a pushover, and it is very exhilarating and very exciting because the player will have a heart attack trying to drive these cars, and it's massively rewarding when you reach that first position. The final track of Big Run is Gridlock USA, and it's a very fast and it's a very fun course. Unfortunately, you have to do this in first position if you want to qualify to the next Grand Prix. That corner is very easy to mess up, and I usually mess up there. If you don't, then you're in first position. If you're not, then you're at the back, and it means you'll have to catch up to all those other cars throughout the entire race. And yes, going in the opposite lane helps as long as you can stay alive. This alley is pretty difficult and you'll have to time that and then weave between the traffic after that to negotiate another 90-degree left-hander. And sometimes when there is oncoming traffic here, it's a debate whether to go into the near or the far lane. And because there will be junctions, it's impossible to predict everything. And look at this one. Final section of Gridlock USA is this straight down this highway, and you can see traffic trying to ram us off, and it's very difficult and it can be frustrating, but great driving is rewarded by the feeling of exhilaration as we complete another lap. You can see we almost made it, but just glancing the side of a vehicle is enough to write us off sometimes. And unfortunately, if that happens with a boost, then that means you'll lose all of the boost and all of your burnout power, and you'll have to boost that all up again, and that's just another drawback of this game. Surprisingly, some of this traffic is predictable, and sometimes if you maintain a speed around a lap, you can predict when a bus is just about to come out of a side junction and hit the opposite lane. But usually it's luck over judgment, and sometimes it requires a lot of luck and a lot of judgment to drive this car. Burnout contains some great music, and the Gridlock USA music is fantastic, and that changes periodically, and sometimes we find the same music repeated again, and that's slightly a shame because the soundtrack could have done with more tracks. But apart from that, you can see we're driving back through another city and trying to take those shortcuts to try and get first place. If a racer crashes into us on the replay, that's great, it means they are stopped, and that means that we are now in first position because those computer players can crash into us if we make a mistake, and that gives us the first place. You may notice that this track is very familiar, and that's because it starts off very familiar. With the first part of Harbour Town, you can see all we have to do is to get around those same corners, and that means that we have a fighting chance. But this is the Euro Marathon, and this is very much longer than Harbour Town, so even though it gives us the heads up and it gives us the action straight from the go, we'll still have to drive through unfamiliar territory. Mild and often groovy soundtrack I think is just perfect for this game, and sometimes it gives us a hot mix on the hottest tracks, and on these very long ones it gives us a nice chilled and relaxed theme, which makes the game easier, and it means that we don't have too much pumping music so that we make tons of mistakes. And you can see there are some fast sections, and it's very easy to cut through, and it's very easy to avoid that traffic most of the time. To be skillful, and this isn't a game for amateurs. As I say, sometimes we can climb up steps and do some amazing stunts, but for the most part it's keeping our nose clean, and it's best to keep that boost in reserve in case that we have some kind of a slowdown, and then we can speed through the rest. Unfortunately, burning out means that we are twice as likely to crash out, and that's not really good when we have to complete this race, and we have to complete this in first position. So you can see we are second position now, and no sign of the leader. You can see we take a different junction here, and this time we have to hang to the left, cut out all of this road, and then hang to the left again for a few more corners, and then we get on to the very easy inner city section. Or at least it would be easy, but there are some random factors which you cannot predict, and sometimes it's luck that you manage to brake in time, or you manage to avoid those cars. Again, that creates a massive exhilarating experience. And the easiest part of this entire track is the tunnel. Once again, the tunnels are the easiest part, and we can go in the opposite lane to get some boost, but I'm just trying to keep going and trying to stay close to that first position in case we find that guy, or if he makes a mistake we'll inherit the first place just like that. One downside of this game is if you have too many crashes you won't find first, and so even making it through to another lap we cannot find first, and so we managed to get second on that particular track. But if you do make it to Savage Streets, then it opens with this one. This is Cliffhanger, which again is pretty fun and pretty easy. Rolling around to take a flying lap of Cliffhanger at the beginning is very straightforward. What you have to do is to use the banks to avoid the traffic, and that won't slow the car down very much, and it means that you can avoid all this. And unfortunately we don't get to turn right on some rough ground this time. We get to pile on down the motorway at high speed, and of course if we are in the opposite lane here we can gain a few more bits of boost that we can accumulate. Another tunnel which is very easy, and you'll have to brake around out here to slow down just to make the next corner, and then we dive onto the highway, and it's a case of weaving in between the lanes and avoiding the traffic, which isn't too hard as long as you use the brake. Computer control players are our biggest threat, and if they get in front and crash, then there is a high chance that we'll crash into them, and so the safest place is in number 1, where we can simply put our foot down, and it's very difficult to maintain that position, but again it gives us that respect when we make it. The most difficult part is this cliff hanging section, and ordinarily you can see that this bottom corner is very difficult, and we only just make it, and you can cut out the grass on some of these sections, and then this dog leg to the right has to be mastered, and then again cut out the grass and then chop into the right for another off-road section before we get around to repeating and looping this lap. Again, I really love the difficulty curve because it starts each Grand Prix off with a very easy course and then a hard one and then a medium one to finish. So it means that we can have a fantastic opportunity to get through it. It means it's a hard difficulty curve, but some of these city streets are actually very fun. Bus always appears at that junction at that point, and so you have to go into the left hand lane to avoid that, and that, again through experience, that particular bus cannot be avoided in any other manner. And you can still see we managed to wrap the car up anyway, which isn't too amazing, but we're still in second position, which is great, and all we have to do is to find that red marker all the way down the road and hopefully avoid all this cross-cutting traffic, which is a pretty difficult part. You can see the opponents crash behind us, which gives us a nice buffer. And this again repeats sections of other courses, and it's very great that it does this because this very easy city section, under normal circumstances, can be piled through very quickly and down into the very easy tunnel. The easy and the medium cars have the absolute perfect amount of grip, and once you've mastered this game and mastered the car control, you can get this thing around most obstacles and perform some great manoeuvres, and for the most part it's just a case of looking all the way ahead, all the way to the next obstacle to avoid. That's a lap of this course. It's very difficult to maintain that first position, and especially with all this cross-town traffic, it means intersections can be lethal, but it means that it can be lethal to your opponents as well. Moving on to the final race of the Mean Streets Grand Prix, it's another night course, and this time it's a very easy one, just like Gridlock USA, and this is called Night Shift. grab onto your seat because the very first thing that we find is a very nice space in the middle of the road which gives us tons of boost for the rest of the level. City tracks are basically made out of 90-degree corners, and so once you remember how to negotiate every corner, it can be a fine art getting around those and the oncoming traffic as well. And skipping down another alley, we find the perfect position to use up some of our burnout, and this speeds us up, and a slight dogleg means that we almost return back to the start again, and another central reservation means we can stock up on our boost power, and that's absolutely fantastic. Again, just one cab in the wrong position manages to knock one corner off our vehicle, and that means that number 2 goes back into number 1. It's that hard in this game, but it is a massive respectful game when you manage to make the first position. With the Burnout, we can get some immense speeds and some immense thrills from this game. The 5th collection of Championship Grand Prix is the Twilight Grand Prix, and that opens with Rush Hour, and Rush Hour is the reverse of Interstate, and as you imagine it's pretty good and it's pretty fast as well. Despite these crashes, Rush Hour is actually one of the fastest courses that you can choose, and it actually gives us a chance to practice Rush Hour after we complete the Euro Marethan, which is the 3rd Grand Prix, and it's essential to practice because this Class 5 course really does take time to master. It isn't the other cars, it's basically that time limit. Boost can be a blessing and a curse, and sometimes the traffic can be as well, and sometimes it's the art of ignoring the boost on sections where you really don't need it, because I think this game actually gives us the same time every single time that we go under a checkpoint, even if we are in front or even if we are behind. So sometimes it's best just to not crash. Remember, Interstate had 10 lanes of following traffic, and so this one has 10 lanes of opposite flowing traffic, and that means that we'll have to get on the off-ramp and use our boost very carefully. manage not to collide with something at that particular junction, then yes, you can boost around this whole track, and if you hold down the right R1 button all the way through a boost, then you get a free boost, and that means we can have chain boosts going on. So watch out for that boost counter. If you have one boost, then use it all up and you'll get one for free. Chain boost mechanic is something which was improved in the later Burnout games, and it's certainly a thrill ride to manage to get all the way through this, but you can see I'm having to ease off just before I get the boost restored again, just so that I can make this city section. With a flatbed in the way, there is absolutely no way that I could have made that junction, and that's sometimes one of the things which is annoying about this game. And sometimes when luck is against us, then we can have crash after crash, and before we know it we can be all the way back at the pack. And of course this thing requires us to get first position in order to qualify for the next race, but we can always make up that position on the highway simply from burning out on the pullover lane, and that means that we are pretty safe as long as we don't crash. The 5th Grand Prix is as far as I've ever got with this game, and I've never actually seen the 6th and the final Grand Prix and those last 3 courses. But with absolutely tons of courses to be going on with, and it's a very steep and rewarding difficulty curve, you'll find that if you complete the face-offs, then you will gain another car, that's the Roadster. So let's check out the next course, and this time we'll check out the Roadster and see if that is any good. Second track of the Twilight Grand Prix is Country Chaos, and you can see straight away that it is made up of different parts of different tracks and tracks that we are already familiar with, and so this Country Chaos shouldn't be too difficult after all. See, the Roadster is faster than the 2 vehicles that we've tried so far and the Saloon, but unfortunately that thing handles like it's on rails, and it's a train. If you can get that thing pointing in the correct direction, then it will get around the corner. If not, then it will slide off that track. You can also collect other cars, and you can see I'm just about completing another face-off. This is the 3rd face-off with a very easy tour around Gridlock USA in the dark, I think, and you can see that that is first position, and that rewards us with yet another vehicle. Unfortunately, as I say, I don't particularly like the bonus vehicles. This gives us a Saloon GT, but to check out the final circuit in the Twilight Grand Prix, let's check that out. And let's see if that's any good. Sunset River is just the evening version of River City, and so it's a virtually identical track, and that means that we shouldn't have too much problem identifying where we are. It's just that this car is very quick. And so thank you once again. I hope this has introduced you to Burnout, one of my favourite driving games of all time, and as a road race rally I absolutely adore this, and I think it's one of the greatest races ever created. So I hope this has taken some of the mystery and the fear out of this game. It's very great, and I hope you can experience this for yourself.